Bronco baby adventures. We're doing stuff and having lots of fun doing our stuff.
Do you ever go to replace your wheel bearing and then you end up blowing up your entire front end? I know I hate when that happens. Luckily, I found this guy at O'Reilly's and he agreed to come and help me. All right, so we're gonna take a look at the axle bearing and axle seal. I got a lot of play in this, and also my hub assembly was really dirty and it didn't look like it was coming from the bearings. So we're gonna go ahead and pull this off and see what's going on back there. You can see, you're just working it off. So we just pulled this off from here, and we're now looking at the bearing and the seal.
So we're going to check the surface that the seal rides on. So you can see that the surface has a little bit of damage. So you're going to check and make sure that your nail doesn't catch on the surface. If your nail catches on the surface, then you have to get a new one. But since my nail doesn't catch, then even though this looks bad, I think the camera's not quite picking it up, but on this side there's quite a bit of damage. It looks like a stain or something, but my nail doesn't catch it, so it's fine. From there, you're gonna check the rollers inside the bearing and see if it has any pitting. You can see that the seal actually seals right here against the back of this surface, and since there's all this dirt in here, then you know that the seal isn't working anymore. So we're gonna replace the seal and clean up the bearing and put it back together.
We got this far, and as you can see, there's grass on the axle shaft and there is no seal. So now we're going to be taking off the front differential to see what's going on in there. We're hearing what do you call it, a grinding noise?
Yeah, random grinding.
Some random grinding on the front end. The front bearings really didn't look too bad. The races were a little bit beat up. So we're going to see what's going on with that.
Check your U-joint. You want to move it in its full range of motion and see if there's any notchiness or binding. This one is in pretty good shape. It's a little stiff, and then you want to check and see if there's any play when you torque it, and this one has zero play, so it's in pretty good shape. So I'm removing the roll bar to gain access to the front cover and make it a little bit easier with the gun. I smell gear oil, so that's good. We know it's at least moist in there. So this is an identification tag, and usually on Fords, the last 3 digits on the bottom signify locker and gear ratio. On this one, it looks like the first 3, so I would imagine the 3 blank space 50 is probably 350 gears with an open differential. Open meaning no limited slip. If it has a limited slip, it'll be an L here.
Man, how lucky you're at O'Reilly's just walking around.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you go to service a diff, I like to leave one bolt in it just a little loose because it'll keep the fluid from rushing out of there when you pry open the cover. And then after the fluid gets done draining, then you can take the cover the rest of the way off.
Huh.
So we're lucky it's got fluid in it. Doesn't look like fantastic fluid. Sometimes on the bigger differentials, there'll be so much fluid in there, it'll just splash out on you. It'll be pretty nasty. This stuff smells terrible. and it'll stain your skin and smell for a real long time.
It looks pretty thick.
Yeah. Well, we're just lucky it had fluid in it. So surprisingly, it doesn't look like there's been a lot of moisture in here.
How can you tell?
The fluid would be more milky,
Oh.
and there would be like see this is probably a water line right here, this little line. Probably a little bit of moisture in here, but not much. But otherwise, it would be like if it was just sitting in water, it would just be completely rusted out, and it would be like really thick and milky looking.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So this is how a differential works. You can see the pinion gear in the very back. Your drive shaft connects to the pinion gear, which then turns this gear, and it's locked to your axles come in and lock to these spider gears, and that's how you get power to each tire.
So how can you tell if everything's looking good in there?
So I'm not too worried about this because there's not a lot of metal shavings. Whenever you drain it, you'll see literally just glitter come out of the bottom here. A way to do a quick check is under these caps are bearings, just like you see on the wheel bearings, but they're held in place by these caps. So if they were really shot, you would be able to move this pinion gear in and out, but there's absolutely zero play in it, so I'm pretty sure that it's fine. The other thing you would do is you would move the drive shaft up and down to check the pinion bearing in the back. It has two bearings similar to wheel bearings, and so you would just shake the drive shaft up and down and see if it had any play in it. Okay, so last night we figured out the seals on solid axles are actually on the inside near the diff. So we're going to go ahead and pull the ring gear out and knock out the seals from each end with a piece of pipe, and then we've got a contraption that we built at Home Depot in order to press the seals back in.
Yeah, what he said. Okay, so we're gonna move this bar here so we can get to the differential. So my cotter pin's already gone. I'm going to remove the castle nut. I just replaced my tie rod not too long ago, so that's loose. But you can use a pickle fork or loosen the nut, have it here, and then just bang it through to get it through there. So now I'm going to unbolt these four. This is held in here, it's got races. And so when it comes out, make sure you know which side goes where, so it doesn't need to go back to the same side that it started on. Move this out of the way, and this is a size 19. Okay, so you're gonna put the pickle fork here and pry out this gear. Again, be careful with the bearings and races, they need to be on the correct side. And make sure that your truck is in park and four-wheel drive. You want the four-wheel drive engaged. So when I pry this, it's gonna pull out and not just climb on top of each other with the gears.
Fudge.
So that, but you know, don't do what I just did. Pretty sure this is the right brace.
Okay, I'm sure it is.
So now we want to remove the axle seals, and we're using a pickle fork on this side, and so you just use something long down the axle housing and push out that seal right there. Boop. So the other side, we found a long piece of pipe laying around the yard, and we did it with the longer side.
Okay, so there's a couple different ways to put the inner axle seals in. You can either use, I've seen people use 2 different diameters of pipe to knock them in from each side of the axle, and that's pretty easy, or a pretty good way to do it. But the way we decided to do it was get a piece of all thread and some nuts and washers from Home Depot, and we're going to use the seal installer that we got from AutoZone. And the way this works is that the seal is going to go on one end, and then we have a nut and washer and the correct seal installer, and then on the other end we're going to have this double nutted so that it won't move, and this side will go into the axle housing, and then we can adjust the nut this way to press the seal into the other side of the axle housing.
So here is where we are at with our little homemade seal installer. I've got my seal here on the left, and then this is a race driver washer, and then a nut. So we are going to tighten it down on this side. I've got a bigger race driver here to put tension against this so we can smoosh it in. I wanted to use a tiny hammer. Apparently that's not a good idea, but we're going to do this instead. So the other side, we used our homemade device and got it in pretty far. It's a little bit crooked and it's not in quite far enough. So now we've got a pipe. We're gonna hold the socket. Against it, and then hammer it in from the other side. So we just put the races on the end of the bearings there, put it in, and then use a little hammer persuasion. Now we're gonna rebolt those brackets,
Bearing caps.
On the left side and the right side according to how they were originally in there. And then we're going to put the diff fluid in, which I guess we have to turn the truck on its side and pour it into the axle, so that's going to be interesting. So the final step, I'm putting in some 80-90 axle oil. I'm gonna pour it in until it starts to spill out the side. So I think it was like about 1.3 these will be the total amount. And then we're done, yay! Okay, so I'm finishing everything up. I put back on that bar that sits under the differential, and I'm finishing up here, putting this guy back on. This is a 7/8. And as you can see, everything's painted and pretty. I'm sure a lot of you will give me shit about painting the rotor, but a lot of people I know and trust do it, including companies that do this professionally. So deal with it. Just kidding, sorta. I was so happy to have that really small little trickle leak I had after we blew apart the whole front axle and replaced all the seals and the differential, only to find it's leaking like a fast leak. And now I have to take apart everything and reseat that seal, except for now I'm not gonna have Chris here to help me, which that was a 2-person job. So if you see me by my truck crying more so than I usually am, that's why.